Connecting with Purpose is about doing what matters most in a time when our families, workplaces, and communities need us. This show from Purpose Views presents honest conversations about what's possible when we invest in helping our people be their best, purposeful selves. You'll hear the challenges of making those investments and tips for reaping their rewards. This show is designed to help people-first leaders like you create the impact you seek. Let me introduce you to the purpose-driven and real-talking hosts, Mark, Neil, and Nell.
Welcome to Connecting with Purpose, Season 2, and I'm here with Caralyn Cooley today. We're super excited to have with us as one of our first guests for this season to kick off a new, refreshed version of some really meaningful conversations on purpose. So, Caralyn, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to have the conversation.
You're very welcome. So, Caralyn is the Chief People Officer at Bowery Farming, which is a modern farming company, and they use indoor farming to essentially grow more with less to give back to people and planet. So it's an incredibly mission-driven organization at the cutting edge of the new wave of agriculture, which is really exciting to dive into and really understand from Caralyn's perspective the people side. Caralyn's been for the last 20 years in various senior leadership roles across the HR function, from Nordius to Jet.com, Amazon. And so that diversity of experience, both in terms of, if you like, company size, stage and sector, has given her a really broad and deep perspective on ultimately what we love, which is, well, what is needed to support people in being at their best and making a difference. So with that very short introduction, just want to formally welcome Caralyn here to kick off again, Connecting with Purpose. So thank you again, Caralyn, for being here. Really excited to have you. And let's start with this, because we'll start with the kind of the flip side of the positive, actually, which is probably like if you've got a little bit of a rant on your view of like what purpose is not, like what's not purpose, and what's really just not the way to sort of tackle purpose and integrate it authentically.
Yeah, I think when I say like what is purpose not, I think about how people confuse purpose with extrinsic motivators that are very surface level. So those for me are things like money and prestige, titles, and all of those things are very surface level. And there have been plenty of times in my career that those things have been motivators that have pushed me through. So, like I get it, and I've been there too, and I always will take more money. So I also get that. But they are surface level. And I think that things that are, so dependent on external forces that you can't own yourself or, really have ownership over, those can be short-lived. They can feel like a quick hit. Like I think on promotions as an example, because I think so many people think like their purpose is to get promoted. They're there to like continue to get bigger titles. And for me, I can remember times when I would get promoted and I would feel absolutely amazing for like 3 seconds. And then I would immediately think about like, oh, how do I get to the next level? How do I get promoted again? And like, not even like basking in the enjoyment or like feeling fulfilled by what had just happened. And I think that's what happens when you like focus on thinking your purpose is these like surface level things like a money or a title or a promotion, versus understanding those are, nice to have and they're great, but they likely aren't going to be something that, sustains you and motivates you through, both good and hard times.
Yeah, love that. Surface level kind of extrinsic factors, which exist in all businesses. And as you said, not many of us are going to turn down more money, but is that the thing that kind of sustainably kind of motivates us to be at our best? So, okay, well, what's the flip side of that then? If they're the surface level extrinsic kind of things that people might consider to be their purpose, or an organization might consider to be the things that kind of drive their people in the right direction, what is purpose to you?
Yeah, I think that purpose is something deeper, right? And I think it takes time to understand what your purpose is, but to really dissect and think about, the things that that like when you're operating that way, or when you're doing those things or working towards them, that energize you, like fulfill you, get you excited, and that you're really good at. And I think a lot of times like those things do overlap. Like the things that you're great at are the equally like those things that get you energized and make you feel fulfilled. And I think you have to be able to do it in a way that that matters, right? Like if you're, like pretty good at something, but it like counts for nothing, then it probably isn't as fulfilling and it isn't going to be your overall purpose. It could be a hobby or something you love to do, but it's not like probably big enough and deep enough, like that going below the surface where you could call it your purpose.
Yeah, I mean that, which is very much aligned here to obviously to our approach, which is exactly that. Essentially, that when we talk about passions, we're talking about those things that you really enjoy and the things that you're good at and things that you care about and things that you believe in. And the impact piece is this sort of all making a meaningful difference on the me, we, and world level for yourself, for the people you surround yourself with most, and for anything beyond that. And I say you're lucky enough. I mean, you've been very intentional with your career, and I know this last sort of move into Bowery was intentionally a mission-driven move. So you're lucky enough, if you like, to have an organization that's genuinely designed to deliver more to the people and planet, hopefully make a profit along the way as well. And therefore you've got a lot of people there that are probably connected into that mission. When you compare where you're at now compared to maybe some of the past experience you've had in other companies, not to say there's good or bad, it's just to sort of compare the two. What have you found in any of those companies that has really worked to kind of to activate or excite or embed people's individual, like you said, use the word energy, like that, to hone that energy and get it in the right direction, and maybe even sort of their individual purpose, and sort of bring that? What have you learned that sort of worked over your career?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's so interesting because I do think that this has been something that I've gotten, more interested in and more passionate about myself in the last, 4 to 5 years than in the, first 15 or so of my career. Because I've seen the difference in the way that I work when something is fulfilling my passion. I've seen the difference in the way other people work. And I think there are probably tons of ways that we do this at Bowery, but two main ways come to mind in terms of like how we try to activate and help people to understand their purpose and then to work in that way. The first being some of the assessments we use, and the second being career conversations. I'll talk about the assessments first. And the reason I go there is I don't think it's always obvious for people what their passion or their purpose is. Like people, might think of some of those surface level extrinsic motivators that I mentioned, or, just not be really clear on what it is that they do particularly well, or not have, spend enough time even doing the things that give them the most energy. Maybe they haven't had the chance to. And so I think assessments can be something that just like help to maybe give people like an aha moment or a bit of an unlock. And we use a platform that I love called Cloverleaf at Bowery that takes a bunch of different assessments and makes them available to folks. And like one of the ones that comes to mind for me is called VIA. It's Values in Action. And it's an assessment that helps you kind of hone in on your personal values. And like, as an example, for me, on my top 5 values, honesty and fairness show up. And I'll tell you, those have a lot to do with my personal purpose. And so as you start to get to know yourself better, like what are the values that drive you? Or we use Clifton Strength Finders, which I love Strength Finders, and have, did it early in my career, and I don't think like really recognized how useful and impactful it can be. And then, revisited it more recently and was like totally wowed by what that can do when you really understand your strengths and the strengths of your team and the complementary nature, but also from like an individual perspective, if you're seeking to, identify your purpose, it goes back to what you're talking about. Like, what are the things you're really good at? And when you're working in that way, it probably like feels really good and you're better because you're working in a way that's really naturally within your strengths. And so I think if you take, whether it's like figuring out your values or figuring out your strengths, I think unpacking some of that probably helps you in that first part of figuring out your purpose, which is to understand like, hey, what are the things that I'm good at that I also like doing that feel natural to me? So that's kind of step one. The second thing I mentioned were career conversations that we do at Bowery, but actually I've done these a couple of times in my career. And I think that sometimes what organizations get wrong is that we're like very backwards looking when we talk, when managers sit down to, talk with folks on their team. It's always like what we did and kind of assessing or diagnosing performance, discussions become essentially a scorecard, right? A review of what you've done. And I think when you're thinking about purpose, you're typically more forward looking, right? You're talking about how can you apply the things that you do extremely well and that you enjoy and that energize you to do more of that and have a bigger impact on the organization. And that's what career conversations at Bowery are. It's this more forward look about like, what do you like doing? What are you good at doing? And are there opportunities to get you involved in projects or programs that would, get you more exposure to that, or a different role, or eventually onto a career path that would allow you to be working in that way more often. So those are just like two examples that come to mind for me of how you can activate. But both of them, like if you break them down, it's really about exploring, right? Like being able to diagnose either like individually or what the organization needs and bringing those together.
Yeah, and when you compare notes across, if you like, across your career and your experience, obviously people identifying their strengths, understanding their values, and I think most importantly, and I like that VIA framework, and it's exactly we used to use the same terminology in my prior life with the kids that we used to coach, values and action, and the whole thing was understanding the values, but what are the behaviors that put them into practice? Is it fair to say across your career, like helping people lean into their strengths and sort of ultimately kind of operationalizing values, whether it's organizational values and or individual values, and kind of finding alignment between them? Has that been something that you've kind of always taken as an approach that you think is critical for this sort of thing?
I wish I could say yes, because I think I'd be a better person and better leader if I could. But I think that, and in different stages of my career, I think I was at different places in organizations and even in my own growth where I can remember being really focused on the flip side, focused more on the things that people didn't do well and trying to coach people on, like whether we want to call them like, opportunities, development areas, or performance deficiencies, all those kinds of things. And I'm certainly not saying that's not important. I think that people do need to be, wide-eyed around, what they do well and also where they need to continue to develop and focus. But it was really, like I said, probably only the last, I'll give it myself like 5-6 years or so that I had that kind of, mental switch where I realized focusing really heavily on one's strengths and helping people to figure out the things that they're really good at, that they like doing, and that the organization gets a ton of value when they do, really started to be one of the ways that I manage. So no, I wish that I had spent the whole last 20 years operating that way, but honestly, it's, more the latter half.
So what was the spark? What was the kind of the thing that ignited that sort of new approach?
I think that I think I would credit Nordeus with this. Nordeus is a small video game company, mobile gaming company in Belgrade, Serbia, that I worked at for 2 years and had just an incredible experience working with really talented folks in an industry that I had never even considered working in before. Lots of, game designers and artists and tons of engineers and creatives. And one of the things that really struck me was that it was an entire organization of people that were doing the thing that they loved the most and had always wanted to do, which is people that just absolutely loved video games, right? It was like they had been, you'd hear these stories. Folks would tell me like, that they were, as kids, they were, playing games, and their parents would say like, stop playing games. Like, this will never amount to anything, and you're wasting your time and your brain and all these things, right? And then meanwhile, they find an intersection where something that they just like genuinely love to do, like their total, hobby, where they would spend their extra time, they get to do that at work and then bring that joy to someone else. And you would see people just light up when they would talk about bringing that joy to more and more people. And so I would just like, I had this moment where I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know that I've ever worked at an organization. I worked at great companies with incredible people, but I had never worked at an organization that was allowing people to work in a space where they loved it. And they were like they were like feeling joy every day because they were doing something they loved, and bringing that to other people felt so fulfilling for folks. And yeah, it was this like total unlock for me where I realized like everyone should be doing that. Like not everybody can literally take like a hobby and make that into their work, but I think everyone can find things that they get like truly excited about and that they feel really energized when they're working in that way or working on those things. And they can find ways to do that at work if they're interested, and spending the time like, thinking about themselves and getting to know themselves in that way, and then finding the right, roles or projects or companies or industries or whatever it is. So I credit Nordeus with that, and I'm really appreciative that I had that time.
I love hearing you talk about people loving their jobs, because I think that's just an underused term in terms of loving what you do, and actually that's kind of surely the ideal that we all want to be working towards. And the fact that was at Nordeus, and you kind of I'm guessing at Bowery, not the same as video games, but there's still a passion element, isn't there? There's still this sort of believing in something that's cutting edge, that's new, that's reinventing the oldest sort of industry in the world, if you like, for good.
Yeah.
How do you then take the Nordeus experience and like bottle that up, all that positive energy and love and passion, and release it at Bowery? And what have you found to be successful in terms of how you've been able to do that?
Yeah, I mean, there are such similarities. And I do believe that experience at Nordeus was like fundamental to me deciding I was going to work at a mission-driven company in my next move. As I started to think about where I would go next, I was only considering mission-driven companies because I think I really had fallen in love with this idea that your work could really mean more to people. I think mission-driven companies tend to attract purpose-driven people. And now that may mean that someone still needs to really spend some time unpacking to understand their individual purpose. But people come to Bowery because they care very deeply about the mission and what we're doing. And then they are willing to, work hard and flex and try all sorts of different things and deal with the disappointment and the ups and downs of being in a startup and, throwing so many shots in order to be successful. And I think when you're working in a way that is part of your personal passion and helps you to feel fulfilled, you demonstrate resilience, right? You like have a grit to push through because you think that what you're doing is really, really meaningful. And so the same way at Nordeus that I think folks were like so passionate of what they were doing for different reasons, like in a different industry and with different backgrounds. I think it feels in some ways so similar at Bowery because people came here because they want to change the world in this very specific way, and being on the positive side of helping to save the planet. And it just, in a lot of ways, it feels similar in the way that manifests.
Yeah, and so I love you talked a couple of things there. Like there's a couple of like, if you like, personal outcomes from folks that are able to sort of embrace their purpose and embed it on a day-to-day basis in their work, which is things like resilience and grit. And there's a lot of other things that come out of it. But when you, like you said, a startup, and it's like throwing as many shots as you can in the right direction to see which ones stick and which ones you've got to double down on, and trying to keep ahead. And there's just so much volatility and uncertainty and obviously like pressure to perform at that stage of a business, that people need some resilience and they need some grit, and they need some other positive things as well. But the other level of that, I suppose, is that there's the business level, world level outcomes, right? That people can see a direct line of sight of what they're doing every day to things that they really care about in terms of, if you like, the impact side of the equation, because you've got passion on one side and impact on the other. And we're talking here about this sort of the intersection between the two. So have you got an actual, just like a success story or an example of somebody you think kind of embodies this, or an area of the business that embodies this, and how it's been able to, be a big success for you guys?
This idea of like capturing people's passion to make a positive impact.
Yeah, capturing their passion and aligning it towards the impact they want to make and enabling them to contribute towards that on a daily basis. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I mean, I feel like that is like literally the essence of Bowery. Like that's what we're doing, because we're bringing people together, and it's the most cross-functional company that I've ever worked at. I think like sometimes people will say, well, what kind of company is it? And it's like a really complicated answer, because we're a tech company, we're a science company, we are a consumer goods company and a food company, we're an operations and logistics company, we're a brand, right? Like there's all these different things coming together, and rarely is anyone doing anything alone. Like it's super, super collaborative, and you're bringing people together with all of these different talents and skill sets, right? Like you might have a big challenge, a big problem to solve, and that requires a data scientist and a design engineer, and a software engineer and an operational leader and a agricultural scientist and so on and so forth, to all come together and to work collectively and use their skills. And I think the reason that we're able to do that really successfully and continue to just like make tremendous progress, because we are much closer to the finish line than we are to the starting line of getting this done. In order to have all of those wins, I think you do need to have people who are really clear on like why they're doing this, because it is not easy to bring people with all of those backgrounds together to solve like unsolved problems. There is a tenacity at Bowery that is unlike anything I've seen anywhere that I've worked. And I think when you're working towards like a mission, going back to the world level, right? When you're working towards things that actually really matter for people and planet, you push through, you find new ways, you like take the learnings, you move on. And you're willing to just like keep on going. This goes back to the resilience and the grit, because it's so much bigger than, just one person or two people or whatever it is. It's important for the entire world.
Yeah, I mean, I think that speaks to the power of shared purpose, right? And everyone kind of having this common why, which in this instance is the organizational purpose, why Bowery exists. And that from what you're saying, given the diversity of perspectives that you have, the cross-functional collaboration that's absolutely necessity, because you're essentially 10 different companies in one, but the common shared purpose is sort of this like grounding force for everybody, and something that everybody can kind of keep their feet on and wrap their arms around and sort of really embrace together. And I can see how actually, almost without having to be any more intentional beyond that in and of itself is a great sort of cohesive force, right? That sort of gets everybody motivated to want to move things and overcome challenges. When you think about the day-to-day of with that as a foundation, which is an incredibly powerful foundation for everyone to believe in, how do you then kind of tweak and change people's contributions towards that based upon their strengths, based upon the things they care about, based upon maybe some impact they want to have that, yes, is connected to Bowery, but there might be other things that they want to do as well that make an impact on other people. How do you kind of try to weave that in to build upon this really solid foundation of a shared purpose?
Yeah. Oh, it's such a great question, a great point, because I do think that what we find is there are people that are like very interested in staying in Bowery, right? They're so connected to what we're doing. But that doesn't mean they want to stay in the same role or working on the same project for the rest of, their career, or for the next 10 years or however long they're going to stay at Bowery. And that's a big part of why we think the career conversations are so important, that we're constantly talking about the things that folks do well. So this dialogue between a manager and folks on their team to understand what they think they're doing well, and to give feedback as well on what the manager thinks, but also like, what gets you excited? Where do you think you're doing your best work? Where do you get energized? Are there things that suck your energy away? And where do you see yourself going, and how can we help you connect the dots? And we have other internal tools to try to give people exposure to places that roles and functions that they might not, otherwise, so that people can do hopefully a better job of exploring than maybe you would expect at like a company Bowery size, right? To have like the right tools so people can explore paths. But like one great example, we had somebody join the people team, do an incredible job, and in dialogue understand that all the things that were exciting her were things that would likely, from a career pathing perspective, put her on a marketing track. And so she moved into a marketing role as her next career move, and she's crushing it over there. And like, were we sad to lose her off the people team? Absolutely, because she was awesome, still is awesome, but doing awesome in that role. But now she stays with Bowery, and Bowery gets the benefit of, her continuing to use her strengths and fulfilling her purpose over in a different role. And similarly, we've had folks move from like recruiting to people experience, move from working with headquarters groups into our farms, or we also hired someone who had never worked on a people team before, hired directly into a people team role because of their operational background, that I just thought would be so beneficial for the team. And she spent like 18 months in the role, and then, spun back out into an operational role that was more aligned with her long-term career path. But she's taking the learnings and everything that she got from the 18 months of, working in a very different type of role, in a different function, with her, to other places in the organization. So we are doing more moves like that than I saw at bigger companies that I was at. Where at bigger companies, what I saw was a lot of upward movement, people staying within a track, and, having the opportunity to promote as different things became available. At Bowery, we do that, of course. But because we're focusing so much on what energizes people, where do they get where do they feel like they're working at their best, and what do they want to do, and trying to help them connect those dots, I see a lot more cross-functional and lateral movement happening as well, that, keeps people, I think, developing and engaged and excited about still working towards the bigger goals of Bowery.
Yeah, which is ironic, isn't it? Because you think in a way, in a big company where there's actually more opportunities in all the other areas, that moving not just up and down, but being able to bounce around should be one of the things that enables big companies to retain talent. Yeah. My guess on why that doesn't happen is that the intentional conversations that you're having, that are collaborative conversations, both about career path and where you want to be based upon your here and now, like what excites you, what do you enjoy most, like what difference do you want to make, how can we help you do that, and then actually helping people move maybe up or maybe across to be able to align more of their day-to-day energy in a forward motion towards a role that really kind of embraces that. It has to start with a conversation, and it has got to start with a conversation with their line manager initially, but then you've got to connect other people into that. And I would think that in a smaller company, in Bowery, because you're mission driven, that maybe those conversations happen a little bit more organically, but it doesn't mean that other companies can't be more intentional about having those conversations. And one other thing, just before I tee up the next question, is it fits really well. You talked about this sort of aligning people's energies, and one of the most tangible outcomes we see from organizations we work with is what we call repurposing of time and energy. So on a weekly basis, everybody that goes through, say, a Live and Lead with Purpose program comes up with their own target of how many hours per week they want to repurpose. And it's not an hour for an hour. The average is about 5.5 hours, but it's not an hour for an hour because they're repurposing to these things, right? Which is the things I love doing, that I can contribute the most and add the most value to, where I can be in flow. I can potentially be 5 times more productive according to that kind of research. And I'm taking off the stuff that at a minimum is contribution neutral, energy neutral, but actually probably more of energy vampire stuff, like sucking the life out of me sometimes. And you can take 5 hours of that off and replace it with 5 hours here. Is a huge kind of impact on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis, especially when you start adding it up, right, across the number of people across the firm. And again, it starts with conversations, and it starts with supporting people in that way. So when you start thinking about those tweaks and sort of trying to align people to where they can contribute at their best and drive the impact they want, what would you feel is like maybe one of the biggest hurdles in your way, biggest challenges that you really need to overcome to get that to the sort of ideal place? It's already in a great place, but how could you just make it ideal?
Yeah, two things came to mind. I know you said one hurdle. One is you really do have to know, right? Like for us, we've spent so much time understanding what people do well, helping them to understand and articulate where they enjoy spending time, what their strengths are, what their personal values are, and so on. But I would just say, like, if you haven't done that work, that's like hurdle number one, because I do think that self-exploration and then the dialogue about it, like understanding who you have on your team and where they want to be and what they want to do, is the first step. And then for like an organization like Bowery, I think the number one hurdle is time. Like doing this does take time. You have to have the right conversations. You have to be intentional. Sometimes for us, what I found, like we'll put people onto projects that logically you go like, well, why is that person working on that project? And it's intentional, right? Because they've talked about something that that they either want exposure to, or they have a strength that we really want to harness and we think would be a great unlock for that team. And we'll put them onto that team or the project. And you see amazing things happen. So then you'll do it again and again. But be like at the beginning, it usually gets off to a slightly slower start because we've done it that way. There's sometimes some mistakes at the beginning and like missteps that if we had just instead put somebody on the team that totally knew how to do it, or it was squarely within their job description, or, whatever it was, it would probably get off the ground faster. So there's some time invested at the front end in order to allow folks who maybe haven't yet had the experience or the exposure to take on those things. But we've got just like incredible results. There's so many, again, I'm thinking of the people team, but it happens across the organization where, we'll look and we'll say, here's just someone with like just incredible talent. And they could be we'll say like a force multiplier. Like if we were to put so-and-so on this project, they're a force multiplier, and we know they will level up the entire team just by being there. And if you think about like, why are we putting that person on the team and what makes them so special? I think it comes down to like the strengths and the way that those manifest when they're working at their best. So yeah, I think like getting back to the hurdle though, it's time, right? It's getting to know the people so that you know that what their strengths are and where they get their energy, the things that they really would love to get involved in and the places that they'd love to work. And then investing time once they're there, because if it is something like new or different or outside of, what has been like their job description or their standard comfort zone, it's probably going to take a little bit longer than someone else that you could have put into that role.
Yeah, understood. And I think that the challenge with time, obviously, is none of us can invent it. Can't create any more, otherwise we'd all be billionaires. And therefore that makes that kind of that daily focus, right, of contribution to strengths, to passions, to impact, all the more important. And like that kind of that repurposing thing, what do you do? What do you do at that kind of micro level, right? So the career conversations and helping people move around, they're great kind of systemic opportunities for people to have that kind of ambition and opportunity to take on new experiences. How do you, or say, how do you, but if so, how do you kind of support people day to day and literally kind of looking at a calendar and interrogating it and sort of saying, look, for the next week or two, like, am I focused on what I absolutely should be focused on? Or is there also this element of people kind of getting involved in a bunch of different stuff? And sometimes it's sufficient and sometimes it isn't. And what's your view on that in terms of how focused people are in terms of their aligning their time and energy to their passions?
Oh, that's a great question. And it's not like it'd be an interesting problem to actually try to solve on a more macro level, right? To say like, hey, how would we make sure that people are able to do this part really well, where they're managing their time and how they're using it? I do think it's more on an individual basis. And one of our values at Bowery is a value called opt-in, which is a very active value. And at the core, it's about saying yes to the things you can say yes to help other people, essentially, right? And so you would find at Bowery, like, we're a Slack heavy culture. Like, if someone throws a question out on Slack, they immediately get, a ton of responses and offers for help and support. If we throw something out there and say, hey, like, we're looking for people to do this, that, or the other thing, it's just amazing how many people step forward in ways to help, and on different sorts of things, right? It isn't, that just one person is always saying, well, I'll help. It depends on the skills that are needed. And again, where people like get pretty excited. I've worked at organizations before that have this phrase that drives me bananas, but they will say, like, if no one volunteers, someone will be voluntold. And it's like, it's so horrible. Like, when, probably for almost everything that you need to have done, there's someone that has a talent in that space and would get excited about it. I've learned that through Strength Finders, how different we are, right? And some of the same activities that totally suck my energy out and that I'm so bad at are the same things that I have people on my team. They are incredible at it, and it fully fills them up and gives them energy to do those same types of tasks. And so I think just giving people the opportunity to know, like, what's available and who could get involved in certain things, to the extent that you can take, essentially volunteers and folks to help and to try new things. I think that's one way. But I'm also not, I'm a realist, right? And I understand that not everyone has the skill set to manage their own time, their own calendar. And so I think if you're going to have that kind of environment like we do at Bowery, where we're oftentimes saying, like, who wants to get involved, and saying yes to people who, raise their hand to get exposure in different ways, having really open dialogue with a person's manager to make sure that they understand the way the person is using their time and agrees that that's the right use of time, and that there's adequate resourcing in order for them to get involved and to, like, lend their skills to a certain area is important. I would say, like, the vast majority of the time it works out just fine, but there have been, a time here or there where we found that people have overextended themselves into areas where, it's not core to their job, but a place that they're very passionate about or excited, they get energy in. And so they've, essentially signed on to do some of that work. And then it could be detrimental to some of the core parts of their job that really need to get done as part of a bigger picture. It's rare, but I think that is, like, one of the watch outs, and it's all about really effective communication between a manager and an individual, so that they've got, like, a fully open dialogue about what they're working on and, how it contributes to the bigger picture.
Yeah, I said it in part from personal experience of being in a mission-driven organization for years and running one, and kind of very, very different, but the risk in an organization that's full of people that are passionate about the mission is that overextension, and that, well, I'll help with this and I'll help with that, and people end up, it can be very collaborative in the open, collaborative, kind of encouraged collaborative sense, But what's really important is that people are focused on what matters most, both in terms of their individual contribution, their contribution to their team, and then any cross-functional collaboration that sits beyond that is being filtered to where they can add the most energy that's needed in that particular area. And there's a level of the fact that they've been able to opt in, so they're engaged and energized to do it, but versus, oh, I can help with this, I can help with this, I can help with this. And I wasn't suggesting that was an inefficiency, but I think to your point, it's a watch out, and that there's getting the right balance between encouraging collaboration and providing a framework within what people should be looking to collaborate on based upon what matters most to them and to that area of the business. And it's that intersection, I think, where the kind of the magic happens, and it's not an easy thing to do. But I think to your point, starts with communication, probably some resources to guide people on that, and a bit of know-how in terms of, well, what to say yes and no to just sort of learn from experience, right? So I appreciate you.
Thing, Mark.
Yeah.
When you were talking, it just prompted me. I think that's exactly right. And I also believe that, oftentimes in organizations, and I can be guilty of this too, there will be bodies of work that need to get done. And sometimes we will assign that work behind the scenes, right? It's a little bit of a black box where it's like, the skills that different people have, and you make some assumptions and you kind of assign it and off you go. Whereas if you can actually just like take a pause, and if it's possible to be a little more transparent about the different bodies of work that are available and just kind of throw it out there, what we've found is sometimes we're just shocked at the people that say, I am so interested in working in that space or being involved in that project or getting a or whatever it is. And so just keeping that in mind as well, that it's not all just about like people volunteering because they see an opportunity. It is also on the leaders to say, like, this is an example of a place where like I can open it up and see if there are some people that would really get like, energy out of this, could learn and develop a new skill set, and make an even bigger contribution to the company as a result. Yeah,
100%. I think that's the intentionality behind it and the support that I think can guide people in the right direction. That gives a kind of, it's almost like passion plus focus gets you to productivity, but productivity in a way that's an energizing, people happy productivity, not productivity just in terms of the metrics in the results. So right, lovely. Well, we've not got a lot of time left, so I'm actually going to transition into a bit more kind of on your personal / professional side, around kind of, I call it leading with legacy, which is sort of, every day. Legacy is not this thing that you think about in 30 or 40 years time and then be like, right, what's my legacy going to be? But it's something you can actually lead with every day and leave this sort of wake behind you, because we all leave a ripple behind us, right? And it can either be positive or negative. So when you think about that, I just got two kind of like, if you like, quick fire questions. The first one is, we talk about a lot about helping people out, kind of understand the essence of when they're at their best, right? Because the essence of that versus the things you're doing are the things that are transferable. So when you're thinking about the essence of you being at your best, what would you say would be 3 words that would sort of summarize the essence of you being at your best?
Yeah, I don't think the words will be surprising, because I probably used at least a few of them repeatedly as we talk, right?
Good.
Impactful. I think that when I am at my best, or when I see other people at their best, it's like you can make such a positive impact when you're at your best. The second one is fulfilled, because it just feels so good when you're like clicking and operating at your best. And then the last word that just came to mind is significant. I think there's something that, when you really are operating your best, you're like, yeah, that mattered. It was bigger than just me.
All right. Now, I love the way you answered that, actually, because that's they're the outcomes of you being at your best, right? In terms of how you feel. I feel impactful, fulfilled, and significant. So I'm going to flip it to say, all right, what are the 3 words that get you there in terms of how they might be values, they might be strengths, they could be behaviors, however you want to sort of articulate that. But 3 words, if you had to summarize it, that enable you to become impactful, to be fulfilled, and to be significant? What would those be?
Yeah. Intentional, right? Like at least in my experience, rarely does it just like fall in your lap. You have to actually plan it out. For me, risk taking. Sometimes it's like stepping outside of my comfort zone. And the other, I'm gonna, I don't know the right word. I'm going to use support, but in the context that I think you have to be willing to take the support that other people are giving you. You know, like you can't, like for me, it's not like a going alone. There are like other people that typically provide some help, some support, and kind of circle around me. And being willing to do that. I'm a person that like sometimes I'm like, I got it, and I have to like actually take the help, take the support, and learn from other people.
Brilliant. I love those. Thank you. And I put you on the spot a bit there with the double whammy question posed in two ways, but I think you might have just given us a little unlock for the show there. So I really appreciate it. Awesome. Last question then. Finish this sentence. Leading with purpose is?
More fulfilling.
It is.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, that's a lovely way to close out. Caralyn, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I can't believe we've used up so much time. I was intending to be a little bit shorter than that, but we've managed to really use up our entire time here. But that's just a testament to how intentionally and thoughtful you are with your responses, and also just the energy that comes across when you're sharing, about your experience and your past and present, and really appreciate that. So thank you very much for your smile and your time and energy and thoughtful comments throughout this. It's been really, really insightful, and I think our audience is going to love it.
Oh, thank you, Mark. I've really enjoyed it, and I love what you guys are doing. So keep up the great work.
We will do. We'll keep in touch.
We're energized about this journey and hope you choose to join us. Click the subscribe button now so you don't miss out on all the actionable wisdom to come.